On Tuesday, we introduced Adherent to the world. We announced our new name, showcased our new brand, and shared our vision for the future of product compliance. Today, we'll unveil the new platform. In many ways, this platform is the why behind our new identity, because Adherent isn't the result of a marketing-led rebranding exercise. It's the result of a transformation. For decades, compliance and risks has helped the world's leading companies navigate the complexities of product compliance. Together with our customers, knowledge partners, and in-house regulatory experts, we've built one of the industry's most trusted sources of regulatory intelligence. That foundation remains at the heart of who we are. We didn't set out to add AI or a new logo to a legacy platform. We set out to rethink product compliance from the ground up. So our technology transformed, something else became clear. Our identity had to transform too. The name Compliance and Risks represents where we came from, but Adherent represents where we're going. And that future is here, a future where global product companies are empowered to comply with speed and accuracy, accelerate product launches, and find new markets for product growth. And do all of this in service of our larger vision, a world where every consumer enjoys safe, sustainable products. That is why I'm incredibly excited to introduce our CEO, Rahul Sachdev. Rahul will share more about the transformation behind Adherent, the platform we're unveiling today, and the future we believe it makes possible. Welcome, Rahul.
Thank you, Kara. Well, as Kara mentioned, product compliance is entering a completely new era, an AI era. For decades, product compliance teams have operated largely the same way. Regulations changed, teams monitored those changes, experts interpreted them, organizations reacted. That model worked when regulatory complexity was manageable. But the world has changed. The number of regulations has exploded. Products have become more complex. Global supply chains have expanded, and now AI has fundamentally changed what's possible. We believe the next generation of compliance won't be defined by better monitoring or better reporting. It'll be defined by intelligent systems that continuously monitor, assess, prioritize, and operationalize compliance at scale. And that's the future we're building towards with Adherent. And that's the opportunity we're here to talk about today. So let's start with the reality compliance professional leaders are facing today. The first challenge is regulatory growth. Every year, organizations must track more regulations across more jurisdictions, affecting more products, materials, substances, and claims. The second challenge is product complexity. Products are no longer built for a single market, they're built for dozens of markets. The third is manual compliance simply doesn't scale anymore. Every high-skilled team spends, even the high-skilled teams spend enormous amount of time reviewing information that ultimately turns out to be irrelevant. And finally, many organizations are experimenting with generic AI, but they're quickly realizing that compliance isn't just a speed problem. It's a trust problem. And when the stakes involving regulatory risk, market access, product launches, corporate liability are high, organizations need answers they can defend. And they need to turn to those answers. They need to turn those answers into actions. Look, the numbers tell the story. In 2025 alone, there were more than 4,500 regulatory notifications globally. A typical company has to manage an average of over 217 regulatory changes every month. A typical company has to, and imagine trying to determine which one of those changes actually matter to your products in your company. For a typical assessment involving 200 applicable regulations, organizations can spend over 500 hours reviewing requirements manually. At the same time, global product companies are managing compliance across anywhere between 10 to more than 60 jurisdictions. That's not a people problem. That's not compliance teams lacking expertise. It's that the scale of the problem has grown beyond what manual workflows were designed to handle. Is it surprising why compliance teams feel overwhelmed? Many organizations see AI as the answer. And look, AI absolutely has enormous potential. We use it for our product and internally. But most compliance leaders quickly discover a difficult trade-off. On one side, you have generic AI. That's fast. It can generate answers instantly. But it often lacks explainability, traceability, auditability, and domain-specific understanding. On the other hand, you have traditional compliance processes. They're trusted, they're defensible, but they're slow, labor-intensive, difficult to scale. We don't think product compliance teams should have to make a trade-off. They deserve both. They deserve the speed that AI makes possible, and they deserve the trust required for high-stakes compliance decisions. And that's the philosophy behind everything we've built. The goal was never to replace compliance experts. The goal was to eliminate the manual work that prevents these experts from operating at their highest value. Speed without trust creates risk. Trust without speed creates bottlenecks. Adherent is designed to deliver both simultaneously. And as we began building Adherent, we started with some simple questions. Above all, what if product compliance worked differently? What if compliance teams no longer spent their days manually tracking regulatory change, maintaining spreadsheets, and chasing information across disconnected systems? What if applicability assessments happened automatically, instantly identifying which regulations matter to which products, markets, and suppliers? What if compliance operations could be orchestrated continuously instead of periodically? And regulatory intelligence turned into repeatable workflows and actionable outcomes? And what if compliance professionals had less repetitive administrative work to do? They could focus on what they do best, applying expertise, managing risks, making strategic business decisions. And those questions became the foundation for our platform. We weren't just trying to build a better alerting system. We were trying to rethink how compliance gets done. And today, we're really excited to introduce Adherent, an agentic platform purpose-built for product compliance. Adherent combines nearly 25 years of expert, curated regulatory intelligence with purpose-built AI agents that automate compliance operations. The platform continuously monitors regulatory change, assesses applicability, identifies required actions, prioritizes risk, and helps coordinate compliance workflows across the organization at a scale with accuracy that was previously impossible. And the result is something very different from generic AI. Not just answers, operationalized compliance. And for the first time, compliance teams no longer have to choose between speed and trust. Unlocking both changes what compliance teams can contribute to the business. excuse me, at the heart of Adherent experience is RE. We think of RE as a digital teammate for compliance professionals. RE doesn't replace human expertise, it extends it. RE can help identify applicable regulations, investigate compliance questions, prioritize actions, surface risks, and guide users through complex compliance workflows. Instead of spending time gathering information, compliance teams can spend their time making decisions. And that's the shift we're trying to facilitate, moving compliance professionals from manual execution to strategic leadership. In a few minutes, Shane and Meg will show you exactly how RE and Adherent platform make that possible in practice. Look, everything we've discussed so far comes down to a very simple promise. As I mentioned earlier, we don't believe that compliance teams should be forced to choose between speed and trust. We help compliance team achieve both. Our promise to you and our customers is to give compliance team the ability to move at a speed their business requires, while maintaining rigor, traceability, and accountability that regulators, customers, and stakeholders expect. That means faster assessments, faster market entry, faster response to regulatory change. But it also means recommendations are explainable, decisions are traceable, actions can be defended. Ultimately, our goal is simply not to help organizations do compliance faster, it's to help them do compliance better. Because when you combine speed and trust, compliance stops being a bottleneck and starts being a competitive advantage. This is really what today's announcement's about. We believe product compliance is entering a new era. Historically, product compliance has been built around manual monitoring, fragmented workflows, reactive decision-making. Teams spent their time chasing information, interpreting change, responding after the fact. Compliance was viewed as a necessary cost of doing business. But the future looks very different. Continuous monitoring replaces periodic workflows. AI-driven operations replace manual processes. Organizations move from reactive to proactive decision-making, and compliance evolves from a cost center to a driver of growth. That's why compliance and risk became Adherent. It's not simply a new brand, it's a reflection of where we believe the industry itself is changing. Companies that succeed over the next decade won't be the ones that react to regulatory change fastest. They'll be the ones who continuously understand what's changing, what matters most, and what actions to take next. The future of compliance isn't manual. It's not generic AI. It's AI-driven compliance operations. That's the future we're building. And we're here to show it to you. So with that, I'll hand you over to Shane and Meg to show you exactly how Adherent delivers on this vision in practice. Over to you.
Thank you, Rahul. So you asked a really interesting question, right? What if product compliance worked differently? Meg and I have a combined 17 years of experience in this industry, and for the last 18 months or so, we've worked alongside our product and engineering teams to reimagine the world of product compliance with your hardest problems at the center of it. And you feel the same way we do. The rules are never stop changing, the pace and complexities only grow. So we took the regulatory foundation that we've built for over the last 25 years, we combined it with the advances in AI. Right, there's a lot to your job, but today we're focused on how we solve three of your biggest challenges. So just before we get into the demo, let's look at those challenges, because the demo will be centered around all three of them. First, compliance monitoring. What new or changing regulations actually apply to my products? Get the mapping wrong here, and everything downstream is wrong. So precision here matters more than anything. Second is prioritization. Once you know what applies, then the question is, which one matters most? Depending on your products and markets, this list can be long. You cannot do everything at once. So what do you tackle first? And third, compliance actions. What exactly do I need to do for each product? Because this is the job, right? Turning regulations into specific actions that keep you compliant. Solve these three problems, and the work of product compliance starts to look fundamentally different. Today, you're going to see all three solved live. Here's what I want you to walk away with. By the end of this demo, you'll have seen exactly how Adherent and ARI, the intelligence behind it, turns those three problems into defensible answers in minutes. So what are they again, right? Tell me what regulations apply to my products. Tell me which regulations have the biggest impact on my business. And tell me what I need to do to remain compliant for each product. So let me bring in Meg, who will help show it to us.
Thank you, Shane. So, we have worked with monitoring teams of up to 50 people. So we've seen every flavor of the role. Our number one goal was to free all of these experts that we've worked with from the manual reactive state that they live in, so that they can use their expertise where it counts to make compliance a strategy. Activities such as advocacy, bringing compliance into R&D, getting ahead of regulatory change and building change into their business, real value-add activities. We built Adherent to flex around any configuration of products, markets, and topics. Onboarding is personalized to each user so that we can capture your responsibilities correctly and only ever surface the regulations that apply to you and your monitoring responsibilities. So let me start with products. What I've done here is I've entered two drastically different products so that we can see the power of decision making that ARI does across the platform. So I have an enterprise grade rack and tower server, and I have a children's hoodie with some detail on it. Then we choose the territories to cover for these. So where am I selling my products? This is a regulated geographical hierarchy. So it's safe for me to choose a specific country and know and be comforted, I suppose, by the fact that it will know where it's regulated. It will know, for example, in this case, that it needs to include EU regulation. I'm going to go with Germany and the UK for the sake of this demo. Then our users, because we know the way compliance teams work, we know that they're often structured by subject matter expertise area. So we know there's often a chemicals person, a labeling person, a packaging person, a safety person within an organization. So we let that configuration happen here as well. So I can be responsible for all of my company's products from a labeling perspective, or a very niche area, very niche geography, or very niche products. I won't in this case, just so that you can see all of the results that come through. What happens now is the tool is gathering publicly available information about these products. It then hands them over to our assessment agent that assesses all of the regulations in our database for relevance to the products that I entered, and it extracts the actions as well. We do know that one of the key problems that legacy compliance platforms have is that setup takes weeks, because most platforms don't know the intricacies of your products and your markets. So now, with our product intelligence agent powering all of the decisions in the platform, whose job it is to understand the regulated attributes of the product, what used to take weeks can be done in seconds.
Thanks, Meg. And let me just say, as this is loading up, right, we wanted Adherent's first job to make setup as simple as possible. Right, under the hood is ARI doing all the heavy lifting for you. You don't need to know how your product is regulated for ARI to assess it correctly. And that's the intelligence built in. So Meg, show us what did Ari do with the product names that you entered in the onboarding phase?
Sure, so I'm going to hop over to the product portfolio to start with. So Ari's job here is to use its product intelligence skill to extract all of the regulated attributes from the product. Now, in this case, it's going to make some assumptions. I've not entered a brand, I've not entered the SKU, the specific SKU of the product, but it will assume some things I can override, I can correct. And this is fundamental because it powers all of the decision making from a regulatory perspective and an actions perspective throughout the platform. So Ari's job here is to know what to look for in a product in order to understand how a regulation might be applicable. This information typically lives in the brains of subject matter expertise within organizations, right? In the case of children's apparel, they know to go look for a drawstring. They know that that will bring in additional safety regulations. It's sometimes completely restricted. They'll also know to go look for how it's used. Is it used by children? That will give us new chemical restrictions and new flammability warnings and restrictions to include, and to include all of the substances and components within the product as well. Just to show the kind of drastically different example, we're looking at a B2B enterprise level rack and tower server. We're seeing it has components, a lot of technical components in this case, a lot of technical features. It identifies as an industrial product. It's for commercial use. It's a B2B sales channel. So these attributes are key, as compliance people will know, when understanding whether a regulation applies. Users are free to override this information, free to ask or add specific substances, specific limits of substances, so that the decision making can become more powerful. So again, the more the user corrects and adds information here, the more accurate our assessment decision making can be.
This is incredibly powerful, right? Because it becomes the context behind every decision Ari makes. Like at the start, right? Which regulations apply, which ones matter most, and what do you need to do for each product. Ari starts to become your trusted digital compliance partner, living right inside Adherent, helping you make decisions faster and reducing risk of a miss. Meg, show us how Ari uses that product profile to solve that first core problem, right? Compliance monitoring. Or in other words, how does Ari tell us what changing regulations apply to my products and my markets?
Sure. So I'm going to come into our landing page, and in our landing page, Ari's job is to surface all the new and changed regulations that are applicable to my areas of responsibilities. So Ari knows your products, and what she does is she surfaces every change that applied to you, in this case in the last 14 days. But Ari is always on. She assesses new changes as they land. So you wake up with the heavy lifting already done.
And if we just even look at the scale of what's filtered out before we even reach this page, thousands of regulations narrowed down to the ones that impact only your products and your markets. But Ari doesn't stop at that first core problem of what applies to your business. It also helps you focus on the regulations that have the biggest impact. This brings us to our second core problem, prioritization. Meg, show us how Ari ranks and scores each applicable regulation to help our users understand, what would have the biggest impact on their business.
Sure. So what Ari's telling me here is that she's found 4 new regulations that are applicable to me, but she's also surfacing the highest priority within those 4. So part of Ari's job is to tell me why a regulation might be high priority. Again, knowing how stretched compliance teams are, we know that they are often not able to address every single alert that's coming through. So what we're doing here is giving them the key ones that should be addressed first. We're doing that based on a number of factors within the regulation and within the context of your business and your products. So we have the regulatory status. In this case, it's a proposed regulation. It's not in force yet, so it's less urgent than a regulation that I'm just finding out about that's already in force. The time to deadline, so as soon as a compliance deadline or a date of entry into force is tracking, or how soon a date of entry into force is tracking towards my products, how likely a regulation, a proposed regulation, is to be approved, how many of my products are affected by this regulation, my business's products, and then within that, what's the effort to implement a regulation? So again, giving me a better runway for implementing a regulation based on whether there's a design change within this particular regulation versus a reporting obligation or a labeling obligation. I'm going to click into one of the examples that Ari has surfaced. So this German regulation has determined is applicable to my responsibilities. So what the user can see is all of our rich context that's entered by our expert team, giving them a glance and a summary of the regulation itself. They can dig into the priority and why they're being told this is, in this case, a medium priority. And then they can see why it applies to my products. So what happens here is the rich context that we've added to the portfolio with the product intelligence agent is used to pass through some decision making against this regulation. So it's making some decision based on what it knows about the packaging of this product. What I can see is that it's potentially applicable to this hoodie because of the type of packaging I'm using, and it's potentially also applicable to the server. I can ask it to tell me more about its thought process and how it came to this conclusion. And then I can also override it. I can say, you know what, I know more about my product. I'm going to give you new context about my product that you didn't already know. Maybe it's the type of packaging. And what happens then is that information is stored in the portfolio for this product, and better decision making happens every time a regulation is assessed based on that new information as well. If I don't have enough information here in terms of applicability or what's happening, we touched on Ari being your co-pilot, your companion for making regulatory decisions. So I can ask Ari to tell me more about this regulation and its deadlines. And the nice thing about this is it's based on our data set that has been curated and created by our experts over the last 20 years and is still being kept up to date by our expert team. The nicest part is that it won't make assumptions, and it won't make decisions and assumptions based on publicly available opinions in boards and threads that exist out on the internet. It's using a curated and expert created data set in order to tell you what's happening or to answer your questions. So you can see in this case, she's answering my question about the deadlines. A nice use case too is to ask, are there equivalents? And again, she'll search the expert data set in order to answer this question. Might be a complicated answer, hopefully. So you can see it surface PPWR. I can navigate to them. I can understand more about that these other regulations as well, and start to converse and dig a little deeper on equivalences to this regulation in the EU.
from working with customers over years now, we know getting moving on the right regulation can take days, sometimes weeks. Knowing a regulation, if it applies, is one thing. Knowing what to focus on first based off of business impact is another thing altogether. You get that right, and your team gets into the work that matters much faster. So let's now move and tackle that third core problem, compliance actions. So in other words, tell me what I need to do for each product to remain compliant to this change. Let's go deeper into this regulation and show how Ari has extracted the actions to help you understand what is it that you have to do here.
Sure. So the third skill that we've given Ari is to extract all potentially applicable actions, requirements, and citations from a regulation. Her job initially is to extract everything that's potentially applicable so that we can stand over how comprehensive the requirements are within a particular regulation. So you can see this is quite broad. There's a number of, first, a plain English language instruction around what you need to do. In this case, there's a waste to take back action, and then there's some submissions to do. We can see who's responsible. But ultimately, I want to know what I need to do for my products. So I'm responsible for a particular area or a particular set of products. What I can do is ask Ari to generate the products just for my product, or generate the actions and requirements just for my products. So this will take a couple of seconds, but once it's done, Ari has read through all of the requirements. She has passed through our product portfolio again and looked for just the applicable requirements and actions for my specific products. So what I'm getting here is a much more tailored set of actions and understanding of what I need to do as soon as she generates these actions for us. So what I'm looking at here is similar actions, the requirements underneath, and I wanted to look for a recyclability target because I thought that was a nice one to show you guys. Let me see, can I find it? I do want to show you the references. So her job, I suppose, is always for you guys to be able to trust what she's saying, but always be able to drill down and verify into the source and the citation within the document so that you can trust it. Maybe there's another good example here. So again, these are references from the document themselves that tell our users that there's a roll up, I suppose, her action decision making or action aggregation so that you can understand and trust what she's telling you.
Thanks, Meg. I love how Ari has already kind of formed a personality in Adherent, and it's becoming a she. It's really fun. So what you showed us is so powerful, and it's arguably the hardest problem to solve. But Ari is taking a regulation and it's worked out exactly what it means for your products, not products in general, yours specifically, and that's done within a matter of minutes. Monitoring then stops being manual and reactive, and your team finally gets to work ahead of the change instead of chasing it. And this is exactly what it means to have Ari by your side, always protecting every one of your products that are out in the market. So this is how you get your time back. No more reading regulations line by line to work out what applies and what doesn't. And if you had tried popular AI tools, you know the catch, right? You end up needing to check every answer, which can take sometimes as long as doing the work itself. But we built Ari to do all of this for you faster with results that you can trust. So we set out to tackle 3 of the biggest problems in your work, and we've solved each one of them. Right, so compliance monitoring. Tell me what regulatory changes actually apply to my products and my markets. Prioritization. Tell me which of those applicable regulations have the biggest impact on my business. Where do I start? And compliance actions. Tell me what I need to do to remain compliant for each product. Ari becomes an extension of your team, doing all the heavy, repetitive work that used to drain your time and your team's time. It shifts you from reactive to proactive, and it puts your experts where they belong, on the decisions only they can make. And this is compliance as an advantage, not as an overhead. Remember earlier, Rahul asked, what if product compliance worked differently? You've just seen the answer. And Meg and I could not be prouder to show you what the incredible team at Adherent has built. And believe me, we're only getting started. Today, our demo was about speed, how fast Adherent gets you through the hardest problems of compliance. The other half of this equation is trust. So let me hand over to our CTO, Eric Farr, who will show you why you can trust these results and what sets our patent-pending agentic AI apart from anything else on the market. Over to you, Eric.
Actually, before I'm going to interrupt Eric for 1 second, we had so many great questions that came in throughout the demonstration. So I feel like it would be great if we could answer a few of those before we let Eric get rolling, if that's okay with the team. So let's take a few. Yeah. So from Marco, it says, hi, about the score for each regulation. Can it be customized with my own criteria? Maybe that's a good one for Shane and Meg.
You want to take it, Shane?
Yes, I can. Yeah, that's the intent. Right now, we have an out-of-the-box criteria score that we have for all users. But our intent is to capture more context that we don't have. And that context is what's inside your business, inside your brains, how you use to actually prioritize regulations for your business. So the future of that particular feature, prioritization, is where you're able to start configuring those criteria that we give you, but also capture more business context. So the outcome is much more tailored to how you prioritize within your business. And that will be different for every company. So how do we capture those differences and those nuances? That's very much the intent of where we're going with prioritization. Thanks for the question, Marco.
Great. We got some questions, a couple of questions in from Yasmin. So she says, is there any of the identified regulations and related web references linked in the tool? For example, can I find the original text behind the analysis?
Yes, I can take that, Shane. So we have so much rich context that's already, this is why it's so powerful. It's already, it's built on top of all of the rich context that our expert team have added to our system. Every regulation that either references or is based on or connects to or even just has a loose basis on is connected. There's an incredible matrix of regulations within the system, and we didn't get to show you everything, but there's a whole reference network you can dig into. There's also every document, every guidance document, supporting document is included, attached to a regulation. And we have a cool AI translation feature that lets you translate a regulation within the tool and share it with your colleagues as well. So there's a whole load of context. We didn't have time to show you guys today. We wanted to show off a lot of the AI work, but all of that rich context and what powers all of the AI decision making ultimately is founded upon expert created data that has these huge matrix of relationships and an incredible rich source of data as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Had another question come in from Gerald. It's in German, but I can understand it. It just says, will Ari be able to answer questions in other languages like German, Spanish, etc.?
That is a great question. I actually believe that it would, because the underlying agentic technology underneath does understand multiple languages. But that is something I want to go play with and try right after this and see how it does.
Great. Another question came in from Emil. If a product has multiple peripherals, for example, power supply, etc., then would these need to be added and confirmed separately, or would these be potentially added by the AI agent?
So it's mostly added by the AI agent. So you can saw in the demo that all Meg needed to do was enter the name of the product. And ARI does the heavy lifting, about 80-90% of all the various attributes, components, intended use that kind of make up that product. And that's where that rich context is extremely important for how we actually make assessments and make determinations on applicability, prioritization, and actions. But you are free to add additional attributes if it has missed any. For example, if it missed that external power supply, then you are able to kind of add in your own attributes, within that portfolio space to make sure that your product is set up correctly and that you're happy with all of those components, attributes, intended uses being reflected in the Adherent platform. That leads to having a higher confidence of the answers that it produces.
Great. Now, there are a lot more questions here, but I think in the interest of time, I'd love to hand it over to Eric, and we should still have some additional time.
Before you go, yes, we support multiple languages. I just tested it.
Okay, good.
There we go.
How's that for real time?
Did it answer in the language that you asked it in? That's what I'm most curious about.
Yes, it did. Okay. Yes, it did. I tried Spanish and it worked.
Okay, fantastic. I can't believe we didn't know that, but now we do. Such a great question, as all the questions were. And thank you.
Sorry, Eric, to interrupt.
Yeah, no,
I asked Ari Gerald's question, and it responded in German. So, yes, is the answer.
All right, fantastic. So we're learning on this webinar as well. It's fantastic. Such good questions. And thank you, Meg and Shane, for a great glimpse at what the new platform can do. I know you guys are going to want to jump in there and play with it and explore it on your own for sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Eric Farr, Chief Technology Officer here at Adherent. And you can see from that demo that we're definitely delivering on speed. I'd like to take a few minutes to take you under the hood and show you how we're also delivering on trust. Let's start with a basic question that some of you may be asking. Can I do this using off-the-shelf tools that I already have access to? Well, before we invested millions of dollars building this platform, we asked the very same question. In fact, periodically, we challenge our QA team to try and match the results coming from our platform using any off-the-shelf tools they can find. We really encourage them to try to beat the Adherent platform. And believe me, they take that challenge up with gusto. Well, we've discovered 3 key barriers to even coming close to what our platform provides. The first thing we tried was to ask the LLMs to simply return all the regulations for a given context. What you see on this slide are the results for sustainability regulations based on a company profile. We found that the LLMs, no matter how many times we asked or pleaded, never provided all of the applicable regulations. Each time, they would confidently report that they had found them all. However, we could never get more than about 40%, and usually closer to 30 or 35%. You can even see one instance here where we only got 5% of the in-force regulations back for one of the sample companies. After giving up on getting a complete set of regulations back for the models, we made it even easier for them, or so we thought. In this test, we provided the complete list of potential regulations and simply asked the model to tell us which of that set actually applies to each of the test companies. This time we had the opposite problem. The models were way too eager to say that too many of the regulations apply. So we went from incomplete results that might lead to a compliance miss to the noise problem, which will bog your team down in sorting through so many non-relevant regulations, and so much for speed. And even if you are able to get the LLMs to give you all the regulations that apply to your products and only those regulations, what happens tomorrow when those regulations change or new ones arise? First, you have to deal with the model's knowledge cutoff, which is usually months in the past. And even if that model has some sort of web search available, you don't have control over how that index is updated, or a way to have it give you just the updates since your last query. So I feel like I've been dumping on the LLMs here, but that's not really the case. They weren't built to solve this problem. So let me tell you about our platform, which was. Our platform is designed from the ground up to give you both speed and trust. And it all starts with the foundation of the comprehensive set of regulations curated through our decades of experience, so we never miss one. The next key step is understanding the decision logic inherent in product regulations. 2 of our 3 patents are related to this critical step. We identify and normalize the criteria that drive applicability. In fact, this is so important that we have an entire patent on the technology we built to ensure that we get this step right. The next key innovation is that product intelligence agent that Meg showed you. Again, we rely on our domain expertise to understand what matters when it comes to regulations and what doesn't. So then we build that product profile so that it can answer all the questions in the decision logic that we extracted from the regs. Then the final piece that brings it all together is the agentic logic that does the assessment. The end result is that we assess every regulation against each of your products and provide the rationale behind the decision and traceability back to the wording of the regulation. And if we do get something wrong, you have everything you need to trace it back to the error, whether it was a missing piece of information about your product or an error in the reasoning logic. In any case, you have the control and the power to fix it and make any adjustments so we get it right the next time. Speaking of trust, even if all the answers are right, you can't trust a solution if it doesn't treat your data with care. So we've built our reputation on trust, and we brought that same approach to the new platform. We isolate your data in its own database, and we never train models on your proprietary data. And as I've alluded to, we're not asking you to outsource your compliance decisions to us. We make evidence-based recommendations, but the power and control is always in your hands. But of course, the proof of the pudding is always in the tasting, so I hope you'll get your hands on the platform and try it out with your own products. So that's the technology, but I know the next question is, what does this actually mean for the business? What's the cost of getting this wrong, and what's the value of getting it right? Let me invite Kara back to talk more about this.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. While you were talking, we actually had a few more great questions come in. And one of them, I think, would be great for us to answer. So Thomas asked, will there still be the option available to contact a specialist/expert, like a human being, in case of doubt related to answers generated by the AI agent?
I believe the answer to that one is yes, but I'm looking at Meg just to make sure. I believe that the Ask Our Experts is fully available in the new application.
That's the plan. Yeah. We have some nice new ideas and exciting things coming with Ask Our Experts. So that button isn't there yet, but it will be there really soon. We just have some nice plans for it coming.
Great. Another question came in. It says, it's from Kara. When applying customizations, is that only applied to your individual account, or can it be shared with the team? We want to ensure on a team level that product information is applied consistently.
Yeah, it's super important. So when you saw Meg set up those 2 products are products that are set up for the entire organization and not products set up for each user. We want to make sure there's one single source of truth when it comes to the product and the definition of that product. So it's driving the same trustable answers across any user within the organization that is responsible for monitoring for that product. So when you talk about customizations, your product is defined kind of once, and every user in your org uses that same definition of the product to look at, what applies to me, which one's most important, and what actions do I actually have to take to be compliant. Great.
And one more before I'll move on to my section. Eric, you kind of touched on this a little bit as you were presenting, but it's from Leonardo, and it says, how do you validate the sources of these regulations? Who are your local sources that are able to interpret correctly the regulations?
So I think this is speaking to our team of regulatory experts that curate the data. So this is the same team that has been performing this for like multiple decades. And that's what we rely on. Those are the folks who make sure that we have the right data. They're the same ones that are also helping us to validate anything that we have AI do. So all of the testing that we do and the validation is by that same team of regulatory experts.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll still save some more time. I see more questions coming in, but I will keep on going with the presentation here. So why now? What is the business impact? Let's take a look at how organizations typically approach a global regulatory assessment today. The first approach is a largely manual compliance team, often supported by general purpose AI tools. While AI can assist with research, people still have to find, interpret, validate, and document requirements. As a result, assessing 200 key regulations can take 4 to 6 months. Coverage may only reach 10 to 20% of relevant regulatory landscape, creating a high risk of missed obligations. When we compare that to legacy compliance platforms, traditional compliance platforms improve on that model by automating portions of the process. Timelines shrink from months to weeks, typically 6 to 8 weeks for the same assessment, and coverage improves to around 70 or 80%. But human review remains a critical bottleneck, limiting the scalability and leaving some of the risk on the table. Now, compare that to Adherent AI. The same assessment can be completed in less than 10 minutes with near 100% coverage and a near zero risk of missing relevant regulations. And because the process is AI powered and workflow driven, scale is no longer constrained by the size of the team. This is the speed and trust advantage. Historically, compliance teams have been forced to choose between speed and confidence, and with Adherent, organizations can move from months to minutes, increasing coverage from 10 to 20% to near complete visibility, and dramatically reduce risk, all without adding manual effort. Okay, so I think we still have 5 more minutes for additional questions, so please keep them coming in. Great, I will answer a few here. So Varun asks, is it also possible to monitor regulatory changes which are still at proposal and discussion level?
I can take that, Cara.
Okay, great.
So we're covering regulations from when they're drafted. So as soon as anything is published in relation to the regulation, at first we'll have a piece of news coming that's potentially relevant. If it's not an official draft yet, then it will move into draft stage, at which stage it's an official alert. Then into proposal, approved and enforced. So yes, we're covering right from signal all the way through to its life cycle as well.
Great. We have a question from Dominique. Is it possible to test the platform?
It absolutely is. So we want you to test drive Adherent with your own products in your own markets. So you get a much more of a comfortable feel of how ARI is addressing these questions for your business. The best way to do it is to get in touch with us. We'll set up a custom demo and we'll give you the tools to come in and test drive it yourself and experience the value that Meg's shown on the demo on the webinar today. Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll move to the next slide in a moment, and you can sign up for a custom demo, and that would be the first step in getting access to actually have a formal test period or trial period with the platform. So I'll put that up on the next slide. Another question from Pascal. Actually, it's quite similar to one we answered about, can your AI model detect early signal of new regulation proposal or regulation revision? We kind of touched on that a little bit, but this is a little bit of a different angle.
Yeah, I'll take that one. And Meg, did you want to answer?
No, I was going to suggest you talk about the experimentation with the signal stuff. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is something to stay tuned for. We're not currently having the AI predict the future, but we definitely have some things in the works to try to get a sense of where regulations are going. Right now, we're relying on our human team and their judgment for those things.
Great. Another question from Gerald. If a product is subject to similar legislation with similar requirements in several countries, is the RE able to group them into same or similar requirements into a single action point?
I'll take that, Cara. So that is very much our intent, and it's one of those things to stay tuned. We have some really exciting plans in the near future. So right now you can generate product actions for each of your products per regulation, but we're working through how do we harmonize those actions across multiple regulations, so you're able to see a single list of actions that represents the most strict set of things that you have to do to be compliant. That's very much the path we're walking, which is how do we get to that situation where if there is multiple regulations calling for similar actions, one is more strict than the other, how can we kind of show you that single strict action so you can start complying efficiently to similar regulations for one of your products or all of your products? That's is very much the exciting path that we're on with the next couple of releases of Adherent.
Great. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to start to wrap it up here. But if there are additional questions that we didn't get to answer, we will follow up with you all directly. I see there's about 33 questions that we still haven't gotten to. So we'll follow up with you all individually. So to see Adherent in action, you can use this QR code now to book a 25-minute demo tailored to your products, markets, and compliance priorities. So what we'll cover in this demo is you can tell us about your products and compliance challenges. We will, this will not be a generic product tour. Every demo will be tailored to your needs. And it'll be in a more one-on-one scenario. So you can ask questions and explore use cases and identify next steps for you. So feel free right now to sign up for a demo. Great. And thank you, everyone. That will conclude today's webinar.